What's channel's poppin' YouTube? Today we are back at it again with another indie book. This time with Ian Kirkpatrick's Bleedmore Bodymore.
Wake me up inside. I can't wake up.
So who is Ian Kirkpatrick? She's an author and YouTuber who runs the YouTube channel Kirkpatrick. I'll link it down below. Definitely go check out her stuff. She does all sorts of book-related stuff like book reviews, discussions on book industry / art news, and even tries to help out indie authors. She even did a joint review of my book, so you could go check that video out. Spoiler alert, she didn't like either of them. But if you want to see me get absolutely BTFO'd, check it out and give her a subscribe. So, as per usual, this review will start with a summary, then what the book did well, what the book did poorly, and finally my opinion and final verdict. So, Bleedmore Bodymore is an urban fantasy horror paranormal story that deals with some mature themes, and then some rather generic YA themes as well. So let's just get into it. This book opens on Joe. Who's Joe? So they are a mechanic. What does Joe look like? Not too sure. What is Joe's gender? You won't know for a few chapters unless you read the blurb. Yeah, the character descriptive work isn't that great in this one, but anyway, Joe is a punk tomboy girl who has short dark hair, a lip ring she likes to suck on a lot, and she really likes skateboarding. She lives with her abusive alcoholic dad, who got all depressed after her mum got up and GTFO'd out of their lives. Anyway, so Jojo Rabbit has been called out to Murder Park, which is a park where lots of murders happen.
Because the clue is in the fucking name.
In order to pick up her friend Waylon Cross's car. He's gone missing in Murder Park. You don't think he's been murdered, do you? Shit. So Jojo and Waylon have been BFFs forever, and Waylon is completely into her, but the book seems a little unsure of whether Joe is into him or not for most of the runtime. Anyway, Joe gets to the car, but there is no Waylon to be seen anywhere. Everything smells horrible, kind of like sulfur, and Joe finds a dead body in Waylon's trunk. It is horribly mangled, but there is also this weird gooey mud stuff that horrifically burns her leg. Anyway, so Joe goes back to her shop and meets her boss, and this guy Jag, who really wishes she would be sucking his dick instead of her lip ring all the time. Anyway, so she calls the Rosses, and the detective Stone shows up to interrogate her. Waylon is missing, there's a dead guy in his boot, and the pigs think that Waylon murdered that guy, and Joe might have something to do with it. Joe hates the police as much as your average drug dealer in Chicago does, and so she is quite combative about the whole thing. Anyway, she basically tells Dwayne, the detective Johnson, to shove it and goes back to being an edgelord. So she goes to Jag about the weird mud shit she found, and so they go back to Murder Park and look for some clues.
It looks like we have a real mystery on our hands.
They find a whole pool of the mud, and her leg gets sucked into it. It burns like hell, and it tries to drag her down. However, Jagermeister manages to save her ass. So yeah, something strange is definitely happening here.
Strange things are happening.
So after getting abused by her dad for a bit, Jojo Rabbit is out at this old fort thing, skateboarding. She sees this young couple walking about, and then some spooky shit starts to happen. Joe follows this strange figure into the fort and dies. Get an F in the chat for Joe. So then she wakes up in this weird bar thing in this ghost town underneath Baltimore. She lives in Baltimore. Actually, I don't think I said that at the beginning. This whole thing takes place in Baltimore. Anyway, she meets this strange androgynous creature called Sol, who is like the meet and greeter for the Land of the Dead. Jojo learns all about how the Land of the Dead works. Basically, time flows weirdly, and everybody lives down here partying it up until it's time for Carol and his raven buddy Val to come along and take you off to be judged. Yeah, one thing I probably should have also mentioned, there's that ravens keep showing up everywhere. Basically, this white-clothed Chad called Charon, like the Greek boatman of the underworld, shows up with this black-clad Ken called Val. Val is literally a raven, and he eats people's hearts and stuff. Anyway, they head to take some dude off to be judged, and they are also head to take Jojo Rabbit back to the land of the living, as she is not actually meant to be dead. So they hop on board the Styx Express, but the dude chickens out and jumps into the water. The water eats away all his flesh and dissolves him. Yikes. Anyway, so Joe comes back to life and dicks around with a bunch of relevant pages, flirting with Jagermeister and acting about Waylon. However, she then remembers something very important. Her dad died. Like, straight up, a few days after her mum left, he blew his own head off. But a few days later, he just came home. Interesting. Now the book's getting good. So everyone seems to have forgotten that Jojo's dad is undead, and she begins to realise it must have something to do with that weird underworld chilling under Baltimore, and more importantly, something to do with Waylon and the body in his trunk. So Jojo decides it's time to perform a cheeky home invasion and goes and checks out Waylon's computer in his house. So she press gangs Jagermeister into helping her out, and they go and look at Waylon's computer. She begins to get some text from him, and he tells her to meet up with him at Murder Park. She gets jumped by a thug, but Waylon saves her life. However, he is all weird now, his eyes are all like bloodshot, and he's hella angry all the time. Wayland then runs off and Jojo Rabbit goes to the bar. In the bar she sees another dude that is kind of like Wayland, very angry with weird eyes. She then recognises him as the dude who jumped into the river Styx and dissolved. He's very angry with her because he says something's up with her and he tries to kill her. She gives him the slip but then gets arrested again because another dead body just showed up with her around. Which kind of makes sense. The police are kind of doing their jobs in this book. After she gets released from the coppers, after another brief, pointless interrogation, she straight up just gets murdered by the dude from the bar and wakes back up in the underworld. So she lives in the underworld for a bit, but it really, really sucks. And so she says she wants to go for her judgment right here, right now. So Karen and Val show up to take her to the judges. However, Jojo finally puts two and two together and realises that if she jumps into the water, she will go back to the real world and become undead, just like her dad, Wayland, and that dude that killed her. Yeah, so she does that. So Jo comes back to life and is possessed by a crazy rage. It is uncontrollable, and so she, goes and kills her dad. I did brush over a lot of the scenes with him, but he is straight up abusive. Like he like chokes her, beats her up, and all that kind of thing. So the fucker had it coming. She then goes to work and is basically told to leave. She's all angry, and Jag realizes something is up. She realizes that she is now cursed, basically, and that is why her dad is so evil all the time. She is now at risk of becoming just like him. That's also why Wayland was so aggressive and that other dude was trying to kill her all the time. So after a bit, she gets a text from Wayland and meets back up with him. They have a cute little reunion, and it's revealed that Wayland did in fact kill the dude in the boot at the beginning. He killed him because that guy killed Wayland, but Wayland basically has unfinished business in the real world. And by unfinished business, I mean he really wants to slip inside Jo. So Jack shows up and Jojo and him are kind of a thing now. He doesn't believe any of this underworld shit, but Jojo realizes that if she can take him to her corpse, he will have no choice but to believe her. So they do that. Ta-da! So Joey and the boys go to the bar, and lo and behold, that same undead bloke from earlier is there. They have a big scrap and everyone runs off. On the way, they run across a crime scene and bump into Detective Stone. However, he doesn't remember Joey anymore. How strange.
Strange things are happening.
But then shit, Karen and Val catch up with Joey and Wayland. They are going to take them right back to the underworld, as you're not allowed to be undead for obvious reasons. However, Joey cuts a deal to be a spooky narc and instead catch all the other undead souls lurking about upstairs and leads Val and Karen to them. Karen agrees, and so they go back to Joey's house. Joey's dad has respawned, and so she kills him again, and Karen takes his soul away to be judged. They then get a job as ethereal snitches, and Jack and Joey bang. The end. So I'll be honest, I read this book a while ago now, and I just sort of forgot to record my review for it, so I might have missed a few things, but this book is pretty solid. So what did it do well? Well, the prose is very good. Of the indie books I've read this year, this has definitely had the best prose, by a mile. Shadow the Conqueror was decent, but this book has legitimately good prose, and yeah. The atmosphere of the book is also really, really awesome. It has this whole spooky vibe and sort of energy that presides over every scene. This twisted version of Baltimore is fantastically realised, and this, just everything oozes character. Speaking of character, the character work, at least for our core characters like Jag and Jo, it's good. It's pretty solid. They're very fleshed out, and they feel like real, breathing people. The cover is also pretty. Like, I would totally buy this book in a bookstore because of the cover, or at least pick it up and read the blurb. Which is something I can't say for all the other indie books that I've reviewed on this channel. So now for the bad. Well, I find a lot of the side characters leave a bit lacking, mainly in their dialogue. It feels like they speak too much like an author and not enough like their character actually would. This is fairly minor, but there are a few quotes that just feel a little off, and too many of the sort of NPC characters sound the same, basically. The book's descriptive work leaves a lot to be desired as well. I did touch on this earlier. A lot of the settings, while having a great sort of vibe and atmosphere to them, lack a lot in ways of physical descriptors, and especially the characters. I touched on this briefly, but I'm a reader that likes to be able to visualize my characters. This book makes that difficult, to say the least. I didn't even know what gender Jo was until about a chapter in, I think. We don't get a description of her hair until page 186, so the descriptive work is a bit meh. So what did I think? Overall, I think this is a solid book. It's not ready for me, I don't think. I think I went in with the wrong expectations, to be fair. I'd read that Kirkpatrick was a satire writer primarily, and as such was expecting some kind of zany satire, when in fact I just got a fairly generic YA fantasy horror, which is no fault on the book itself. That was my fault for not researching it well enough. I I'm looking into checking out Kirkpatrick's debut novel, Dead End Drive, which I'm told is an actual satire, as I'm kind of interested in that. But anyway, what did I think? Well, the thematic content here is really, really strong, and I think quite powerful, actually. Overall, what I got out of this book is a relatively deep reflection on loss and a refusal to move on, and how if you refuse to move on from past events, you will grow angry, bitter, and destroy those you love. Quite literally, the undead refuse to move on, normally because of regret, and then become very violent and risk ruining all the relationships and everything. A very powerful, simple statement, and it's just beautifully displayed in this book. I think it's really, 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 really strong. However, I had some issues with a few things. Although my summary didn't really display here, there is a decent amount of meandering, especially in between Jo coming back to life and her realising her dad is undead. The book would be, I think, stronger if we just went bam, bam, bam. But I'm a reader that prefers stories to be relatively concise, with some exceptions. This book is already pretty short as well, so maybe it would have hurt to cut too much. I just felt like there was a couple of bits of dead space that really could have sped up a little bit. Because the whole Undead Among Us thing is fantastic, and the concepts are fantastic of having like the ghost world underneath the real world. I just feel that it felt a little muddled in its structure, and I don't think it nailed the ending. I was not a fan of the ending. I know there's going to be more books, so I can't really fault it. I just wish the ending was a little more bittersweet, maybe. I mean, it already kind of is, because she's sort of cursed to be undead now, but, like, I don't know. I don't know how I would have ended it. I'm not here to impose or rewrite these books, necessarily. I just didn't like the ending. But, that's me personally. I'm sure many people out there would like the ending of this one. And here's one of my main gripes, and this, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I really didn't like Joey as a character. She's not a bad character, I just hate Snark Lords. I hate them. Every author insists on putting them in everything, but I really hate them. I find her profusely irritating and not particularly funny. She also has this whole, like, I hate the police ACAB kind of attitude, which makes sense for the character, but I think I needed just a little bit more clarity as to whether this was purely a character trait, whether this was sort of an ironic commentary on bumper sticker politics in books, or was in fact a legitimate anti-police message. I don't actually know. I'm inclined to say it's probably just a character trait. I don't want to read too much into it, but I don't know. I think I could have just needed a little bit of separation from the prose to the character, which is difficult because it is a first-person book, so it's quite difficult to make that divide. Because I just found myself cringing a bit at that. But if I was supposed to cringe at that, fantastic. If I wasn't, then it could be a bit fishy with that kind of thing. Anyway, overall, very solid book. If you like fantasy horror, I check this one out. This actually reminds me a lot of A.J. Vrana's The Hollow Gods, but with balls, basically. It's a bold story, but it did stumble at a few hurdles here and there. I'm actually quite undecided on whether to give this a 3 or a 4 out of 5. I think I'm going with 4 out of 5 because I'm feeling kind of positive. Although I did leave this one a 3 out of 5 review on Goodreads, so maybe I should go and change that. It is a competently put together book with a strong and well executed theme. I just personally wasn't crazy about it and don't have much desire to read any more in the series. I don't know, maybe 3 out of 5 is more appropriate, but 7 out of 10. We'll say 7 out of 10. Yeah. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Kirkpatrick's channel. Like the video and subscribe to this channel, and if you want to support me, check out my books. Hell, you can even hop on over to Kirkpatrick's channel and hear some negative reviews of them, or maybe don't because I kind of need the money, but thanks team.
Buy my book! Buy my book! Before it's too late, people!
No!